And with that, we'll get started on this unique discussion that we put together for this event called Cosmic Communicators, the Vital Role of Space Media. This session is once again brought to us by our all-day sponsors, KBR and Aerojet Rocketdyne. So please join me in welcoming our moderator for this session, Christina Hendricks. Christina didn't have to travel very far today, as she is the Vice President of Strategic Communications right here at UAH. Christina, take it away.
Thank you so much, Jim, and I appreciate everyone joining us today. You're going to hear from three amazing professionals, and I am just so honored to say that I have worked with each of them at some point in my career when I worked at NASA and at Dynetics, and I was always impressed, and I still am impressed by the work that they are able to share with each of their audiences, and they've covered some incredible stories in their career, and so I'm going to tell you a little bit about each of them, and then we'll go ahead and get started. First, we have Marcia Dunn, and Marcia has covered the space beat for the Associated Press since 1990. She has witnessed space shuttle flights and reported launches from Kazakhstan. In 1995, she was among the first group of U.S. journalists allowed into the Cosmodrome for a manned Russian Soyuz launch. In 2003, she received the Associated Press Managing Editor's Top Deadline Reporting Prize for her coverage of the Columbia accident, and Dunn is featured in one of Sally Ride Science Series career books for youngsters, Cool Careers in Space Sciences. Marcia has been awarded the Douglas S. Murrow Public Outreach Award from the Space Foundation. Next, we have Jeff Faust. Jeff is a senior staff writer at Space News, where he writes about space policy, commercial spaceflight, and aerospace industry topics. He earned a PhD in planetary sciences from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and a bachelor's degree with honors in geophysics and planetary science from the California Institute of Technology. And last, we have Lee Roop. He is a journalist with more than 4 decades of experience reporting and leading reports from Huntsville, Alabama's technical, military, and scientific sectors. Those include Redstone Arsenal, a federal center of excellence, and its major military tenets and programs including hypersonic missiles. He is also a graduate of the University of Alabama in Huntsville, and he covers NASA Marshall Space Flight Center and America's government and commercial space programs, including major local operations by United Launch Alliance and Blue Origin. And last night, Lee was awarded the National Space Club of Huntsville's Chapter Communications Award, so congratulations to him. So we'll go ahead and get started with our first question. And technology has played a major role in news media, from radio to television to the internet, to now everyone having their own platform to carry their version of content with podcast and social media. So how do you think technology and the entrance of self-made content creators have influenced how traditional news outlets cultivate stories? And we're going to start with you, Marcia, on that one.
I think there's been a huge influx of non-traditional media who are now stepping up to the plate, broadcasting launches live. Cameras focused on the pad down in South Texas on the Starship. And for AP coverage, we have a pretty high standard of what we cover and how much we devote to it. But I have to tell you, when there's a topic trending on other venues online, my editors say, let's get something out there too. And whether it's a new picture from the Webb telescope, or whether it's something going down with SpaceX down at Starship. So I think it's sort of generated more buzz out there, and that's caused the AP to want to maybe get on board some of these trending topics that maybe we wouldn't have otherwise. But the negative part of that is that there's a lot of disinformation being assimilated. And I wanted to read a headline from a story we put up at the end of April. It was not my story, but we have reporters who are assigned to put out fires when it's false news, fake news, crazy assumptions. And this headline was, "Social media posts falsely claim space station footage is faked." The premise was on some online venues that there's nobody on the space station. Everything you see is being Earth stages, just like the moon landings, I guess. They're using the same stage. And so, people believe a lot of this stuff that they're reading out there. And so, part of our job now is to say, well, that's not true, it's not right. Yes, people have been up there and they're doing work, and just because you see astronauts swimming in a pool in Houston doesn't mean that's where everything's being staged, that's just practice. So I see the pros and cons of the tech influencing how I do my job.
Great, thank you. Jeff?
Yeah, I come at this a little different direction because, before I was at Space News, I was one of those self-made content creators. Hi, it's me, I'm the problem. I was a blogger and running a website as a side venture while I had other jobs going on before I joined Space News a little over 9 years ago. So, part of it is blazing your own path to get into covering an industry and trying to find a niche that is not being covered otherwise, or covering it in a different way. So I think we're seeing just a continuation of that now with people on YouTube, on TikTok, on Instagram, and other social media providing their own coverage. Ultimately, the question is, are they serving their audiences with accurate information? Are they providing them with a different way of getting information from the traditional sources? And there's always going to be good and bad with any sort of media you're looking at, whether it's television or print, for those who still actually reprint, and hopefully do. Versus the various online channels. So, you have to, the struggle is always trying to reach the audience of where they are, and encourage, reach out to them in the best way possible, and finding and doing it the way that matches your strengths the best. And so I'm not going to be a YouTuber or TikToker anytime soon, but I'm serving a particular set of audiences in my own way, and there are going to be others who are going to be doing it other ways, so long as they are providing accurate information. And as Marcia said, there's always a challenge there with misinformation or deliberate disinformation. Should welcome anyone who wants to spend the time and energy to try and communicate what's going on in this industry to a broader public.
Well, I guess my first reaction would be that I try to be even more careful and more right. It's not a good day when I wake up and find that something that I've done is being discussed in social media as a general rule. Helpful wouldn't be the word necessarily all the time I would use for it. So I work very, very hard at trying to get it right. Try to adjust the way that I write a little more conversationally, maybe, which is a challenge for what we do. It's scientific, it's technical, but I want it to be reached by the widest readership possible so that that's exciting to me, and I want it to be exciting to other people. Sometimes I have to come back and work on that, what I've actually said. But it is a challenge when everyone can now have their own news platform, their own news opinions, and basically in our world, I think it's been pretty good. I think most of the people that write about what we are all interested in are writing about it because they're passionate about it. They're not writing about it because they want to necessarily tear it down or blow it up. So I welcome that. I welcome that conversation. Just have to be very, very, very careful when you engage. Very, very careful when you write, and very humble, because I'm probably going to have to make some corrections.
That's right. So historically, the media has been able to cover NASA and its programs and call it the space industry. And today, commercial space companies have joined that conversation. There are more diverse programs that are being studied by both NASA and industry. How do you strike the balance of explaining government and commercial entities to the general public? And do you see more interest in certain stories over other stories? And we'll start with you, Jeff.
Well, I have the luxury in some sense of working for a publication that serves the industry. So there's already people who are reading space news already have usually some degree of familiarity with what's going on. Should make clear, commercial space is not new. Space News has been covering commercial space since the publication started nearly 35 years ago. At the time, it was primarily satellite communications companies and the companies that provided the satellites and launches for those companies. Clearly, we have now a much broader, much more diverse industry out there. And I think it's a challenge even for us to try and keep up with all the activity that is going on among both the major established players, but also the startups that are out there raising money, trying new technologies, new approaches to provide new products and services. So it's really exciting. It can be a little tiring sometimes trying to keep up with everything that's going on, but I think that beats the alternative. So while at the same time, obviously, particularly my coverage area, tracking what's going on with NASA and its major contractors as they deal with both the technical issues of doing things like returning humans to the moon, but also the inevitable financial and policy issues as well. In terms of what topics get more interest than another, you wouldn't be surprised that there's one particular company that gets a lot of attention when they're launching rockets or attempting to launch rockets or trying to get an FAA license to launch rockets. They get a lot of attention. Have built up, for lack of a better word, sort of a fandom in the space community of people who are unusually strong supporters of them, and sometimes uncritical supporters of them as well, and will push back at even the slightest bit of criticism about what they're doing. So that's unusual because you do not see that with a lot of other companies out there in the industry. But I know I don't look at our website stats very often, but I've known in general that covering when you're covering SpaceX, you get a lot of attention and a lot of feedback one way or the other.
Well, I wish these companies would communicate with us even more. I would like to hear more about what they're doing, what their presence. Everyone's fairly close. Their operations. They have some operations in this area. I love to go and tour. I love to know what's happening. So if anyone's listening, please communicate with me even more. It is tricky. Like I know that I have a idea that there's something going on at one of our major space company operations here in Huntsville even today that I would love to be able to report. And I've heard it. I think it's probably true. Cannot confirm it. Don't know it. It's not in the company's interest to actually necessarily make that public. So I would love to hear more from them in the conversation. That would make me happier. That would make, I think, readers are fascinated by it, fascinated by what they're doing and the way they're able to, just do it. So if you're in that business, in those companies, those folks, let's converse some more.
Several things here. I think there's room in my stories for everybody at the table. I don't see the companies competing with NASA, and it depends on the story. SpaceX just gave a lift to NASA's Psyche spacecraft to go out to the metal world Psyche asteroid. And the story was about the science, the spacecraft that's now on its way to, on this long journey to get to an asteroid. And SpaceX was just a small mention in my story as being the ticket to get it off the ground. Now, having said that, SpaceX gets clicks. There's no doubt about that. And Musk is a big reason for that. Everybody knows him. Everybody wants to learn more about him. Everybody wants to read about what's going on with Starship and all his other enterprises. And I think for all these other companies out there, the key is making it personal, getting the face of someone to become well-known. And yes, you can't compete with Musk in that regard, but I think that people want to know about the people behind the rockets and the spacecraft, not just the machinery, but it's the people that make the story. In recent years, NASA's best-known astronaut is the Scott Kelly, who spent a whole year up there, and everybody in America at least knows who he is, but they'd be hard-pressed to name some other astronauts, perhaps, even now, and he's been retired from the office for years. So I just think making it personal is a big step forward in reaching out to new audiences and making it pertinent and interesting.
So I have a different question, because we are here at a university, and I just would love to hear your take on how to get more students involved in the reporting and in the communication aspect of it. You know, as those of us who are communicators, we love it. We have a passion for it, and we've been doing it for a number of years, but we know that this next generation of students that are coming out of college, we want their passion to be displayed in the same way that ours is. So what are some things that you would like to see from this next generation when it comes to becoming a reporter and doing more into communications and public relations? Marsha, let's start with you.
Well, I know in my company, the AP, learn how to make really good video. I mean, that's number one on the runway, but be a wonderful writer too. And I always think when I'm writing my stories, unlike maybe Jeff or some others, I'm writing for the general public, and they may not even know anything about. I have to assume they know nothing coming into whatever story I'm writing about. And so I have always tried to write my things as if I were telling a family member or something and just having a conversation, just a chit-chat with people. And so no technical words and jargon, forget jargon, no acronyms. You'll never, hopefully, ever find the word EVA in any of my copy. Just so my advice would be just like, write from your heart, write like you mean it. Write like you would, like you talk to people, and become very well skilled at all the other forms of media today, like webcasts and video and all that other stuff, photographs. It's a big package now. I mean, it's just not about the printed word.
That's right, Lee.
Yeah, that's a great question. I love the W's. I tell people to get excited about the W's. Who's doing what, when, where, and why are they doing it? And it's an old formula, but it absolutely always works. And usually one of them is the clear, the clear leader out of the block. Well, what happened? Well, the rocket didn't take off, or the rocket did take off. Who was involved? Obviously, anything that that Elon does is fantastic news. So just it isn't that hard to structure, and it's tremendous fun to be able to be there and to see it and to be able to talk to the people who are making it happen. Yeah, I would say it's the best job you could possibly have. But not everybody's going to love you all the time, so you do have to be very careful, and you do have to keep those W's in mind. Come on down. You can work with me anytime. Go with me anytime.
Yeah, just to add on that, I would say, find the topics that you are passionate about, but also the method of communication you are passionate about. If you're passionate about some part of the space industry, find the best way that you want to cover that you think you can show off your skills in doing so and reach out to audiences. And there may be mechanisms to do that within the university, within student publications, or even student groups. One of my first writing quote-unquote jobs was editing a newsletter of a student space organization called VBSES2023. Back when I was an undergrad at Caltech 30-ish years ago. And this was just when the internet was getting started, so we were getting fun loading PostScript files up on FTP servers. So in the pre-web days. But find what you like to do and how you like to communicate that. Because if you try to force yourself into doing something you don't really like or a method you don't really like, it's not going to work nearly as well.
I think that's good advice for all of us. And so our last question is, the Artemis missions will be breathtaking, and especially when we land on the moon. And so if NASA or any entity offered you a seat going to the moon, what would be the first story that you would write about? And so I want to start with you, Lee.
I'm really here, and here's how I'm going to prove it to you. This is not happening on a back lot in Los Angeles somewhere. We are really here. I would be, I know I would just be stunned, speechless at first. Just what an incredible experience, what an incredible expanse of space to go across, what an incredible thing to be able to do, to leave one planet and go stand on its satellite and look back. I would, I'd probably also want to be looking around for that stuff they left from the previous flights. It would be really nice to say, it's really here. They really did go. Here's my photograph to show you. But let's do it. I'm ready.
Jeff, if you want to go.
I think my first story would be about the utter failure of the crew selection process that would pick me to go. These are pretty thick glasses, let me tell you. I guess it would be trying to provide that inside perspective of what it would be like to go on such a mission, and whether it's the moon or even just going on like a suborbital flight, a commercial suborbital flight, to be able to provide the insider's view of what the experience really is like, the training is like, and to go beyond simply sort of the engineering science, which are important, but sort of communicate the perspective of the overall experience, which I think would be fascinating. But again, I'm not counting on NASA sending me anytime soon. And also, I would ask to make sure that there was a return trip included.
For me, it would be like the emotions and senses of it all, probably. I probably would have to be sedated just for the launch. So I'm not sure how quickly I could find my first story. But I think that it would be, to sort of like Jeff was saying, to be sort of like a fly on the spaceship wall, and just sort of like, obviously, a journalist wouldn't necessarily be flying the ship, right? We would just be a passenger, and so there'd be no worry about ruining my career if I said or did the wrong thing, right? So I would be really open about my fears and my, what works, what doesn't. Everybody wants to know about the bathroom and the food. Those are the two top things. So I think that someone who has no stake in the game like that could really provide an impartial, honest a reflection of what it's like. And so many of the astronauts come back and say it's really hard to describe. Well, send a writer, right? And I don't know if I'd volunteer, but I think it would be a great idea.
I think everyone who works at NASA would love to hear that. So you heard what they all said. Send a writer. We want to hear it. So now we're going to open it up for some questions from the audience. So we have a few microphones, and we'll start with Sam Ortega right here at the top. Right here.
How about now? That's great. So you as the reporters have the opportunity to interact, have conversations, discuss with all aspects and areas within commercial space, civil space, military space. So you're kind of across the whole spectrum. And to that end, in your conversations, in your observations, in your gathering of data, how do you feel America is doing in the space program?
They're all thinking of an answer right now, so
Well,
whoever wants to jump in.
I guess the first thing I might push back a little bit is on the space program. I think we have to increasingly realize that there is not a single monolithic space program, but there are a wide range of space ventures, whether they're commercial projects, what NASA is doing, what NOAA is doing with weather satellites, and obviously the various DoD programs, which can be as complicated as anything out there in terms of how they're structured and run, even without going into the classified ones. So trying to look at sort of a monolithic space program, I don't think is a useful assessment, because it really is not a monolithic entity. And I think if you looked at it sort of in that way, you would certainly see, in terms of commercial space, the US companies are right now second to none right now. SpaceX is the world leader in launch, to the point now where rivals have to buy their launches from them. In terms of, satellite communications, certainly the U.S. is leader. In civil space, the U.S. is leader, but certainly you got to keep an eye on the rearview window on what China is doing. They have ambitions, and so far they've been executing fairly well on those ambitions, so something to keep an eye on. And certainly in military space, you have tremendous capabilities, but also potentially tremendous vulnerabilities, which is why I think you're seeing, this move towards proliferated LEO, the constellations of satellites that would be less vulnerable to an attack than the big satellites of years past. But certainly there are potential Achilles heels there. But again, the idea of looking at the U.S. space program as a monolithic entity is probably a mindset from the 1960s that is no longer valid in the 2020s.
Yeah, I had to take the chance to come and see what it's like on the other side of the table for all you up there. Worked with you guys for decades, and just wondering, and I appreciate all your coverage of the space industry, but as we've seen more bloggers and other people who will act as reporters, how do you ensure, as you're writing these stories, that you remain well-rounded and unbiased in your reporting coverage?
Well, I know that I think at least some of the bloggers and everything, some of them are very peppy and cheerleady, and that's fine if that's what they want to be. That's their venue. But if you happen to be, in a spacecraft from some other solar system, and you're swinging by and you tune in, you're going to think that's the general consensus of the world, which of course it is not. And I think probably it was Jeff who said, there's a lot of fanboys and girls with a lot of these companies. And so I do everything I can to show no bias, right? To play it straight, just to my job is not to be the cheerleader of any particular company or program, but to just try to tell it like it is, the good with the bad, if there is bad. And I think everybody who reads the AP realizes that we're nonpartisan, and we're proud to always tell both sides of the story as fairly as possible.
I think we have time for one or two more, so right there.
Thank you all for being here, and thanks AAS for giving a platform to this topic as a communicator. I appreciate it. Lee, also appreciate you inviting us into your inbox. We'll be a good steward of your time, because I know how busy each of you is. And my question is, with all of the things that are going on in space, with each sector and all the technologies and all the companies, how do you stay focused, and how do you continue to produce at the rate that you are producing your stories? Because Jeff, you published 4 stories yesterday. That's prolific, I would say. So how do y'all keep your attention spans on these stories as they're all happening out at the same time?
Caffeine helps a lot with the 4 stories a day. No, I mean, it is, like I said before, this is a very dynamic time in the industry, and when I first started Space News, I was always worried, what if I run out of things to write about? What's going to happen? Don't worry about that anymore. Now it's how am I going to get through all these stories in my inbox? So it is very fast paced, but sort of keeping once you get going with something, obviously with anything that you get into a rhythm sometimes. You get into a flow, and I think that's true in this as well. There's always sort of curveballs that are thrown at you at this, but you learn to adapt to that and keep up with what's going. It's fun. It's exciting. I'm not being a cheerleader for the industry, but I will say it's exciting time. It's fun to write about industries when there's a lot going on and there's a lot of interest and enthusiasm about it, much more so than industries that are struggling. But you have to cover both the good and the bad. But it's fun to cover an industry that is as dynamic as what space is right now.
All right. Okay, okay.
You're seeing a lot of independent news reporting recently. I was wondering if you see a lot of people shifting their focus more towards these independent YouTubers and people on Twitter, or do you think they're going to focus more on mainstream as they previously have?
I think there's room for both. I don't know. I think people who like the space topic were quick to jump onto the all things internet anyway with space stuff, and I bet it's not just one-stop shopping. I'll bet they're going from space news to some of the websites, and they want to see what the New York Times is writing and the AP. And so I don't think that it's an either or anymore. And I think there's a lot of cross-pollination between the different medias, in fact, in collecting that information. And then there are those who go straight to the source, they go straight to SpaceX for the webcast and all for the information and for NASA and anything else. And I'll just add that on top of all the stuff that's going on in the business, in the program, I've never seen so much interest in eclipses and cosmic events. I mean, whenever there's an eclipse, my editors want something in advance, and it just seems like the universe is in tune now with everything that's going on, and it's really fun to see.
I just want to thank you all for joining us today. I think this has been excellent, and I think the audience has been really appreciative of having a topic like this at AAS and Braun Symposium. So again, thank you so much for having us, and we're glad that you could join us at UAH for this event.